Hi, in the 2008, the unknown first-time Senator Barack Obama Jr., Senator from Illinois, he had been a resident of Chicago in what seems to be an almost inconceivable reality that would position himself to run as a junior senator from Illinois. This is important to illustrate due to the fact that never in the course of American politics has a less than one-term junior senator was being groomed as a presumptive nominee for the DNC. However, the residents of Illinois, in retrospect, nothing when we try to examine the legitimate birth certificate from Barack Obama. The White House eventually produced an electronic, obviously manufactured certificate of establishing his birthplace in Hawaii. The fraud that this individual would ultimately impersonate would be his greatest amusement perpetrated upon this entire nation. We need not go any further than Barack's book, in his own words, Dreams of My Father, where he stated in no uncertain terms he was born in Kenya. His mother was a CIA asset along with Frank Marshall Davis, Obama's father, as they were subversive Marxist revolutionaries heavily involved in pornography when Barack was young. After what seems to be an unclear separation between his mother and Davis, she was quickly remarried to an Indonesian, and young Barack was educated in the madrasas of Indonesia for what seemed to be a significant influence that would never quite leave Barack. The Islamic education would eventually play a great part in his foreign policy, in addition to the far-left Marxist agenda he would eventually set into motion with absolute vigor. All of this moving around is what seems to be present, some of rather unique citizenship complications. He did establish residence in Hawaii with his maternal grandparents at some point. However, exactly when that was remains a matter of debate. Eventually, his mother, being a CIA asset, would arrange for Obama to attend Harvard Law. It seems quite clear from my own research that the Bilderbergers had already begun to select Obama to eventually become the president, as they had also done with Bill Clinton and George W. as a secret selected for the NWO operation as well. When you understand that the international banking oligarchs that pull the strings of the NWO, it is much easier to connect the dots that will easily establish the NWO agenda as it is and has been implemented over the past 200 years. In the case of H.W. Bush, it happens to be a member of the Council of Foreign Relations and an honorary member of the Bilderberg Group. When he became president in 1988, they had already understood he would do everything in his power to start the final stages of the one world government. During his time in CIA, he developed a relationship with Clinton and understood Clinton was going to further the cause as well as the CIA. By this time, Clinton had been president, already began grooming Obama for the final stage of global governance. With his ideological Marxist collectivism, he would aggressively push domestically as well as far-left radical socialism throughout the government. The 2008 primary season, with Obama as the upstart nobody that seemed to offer the greatest hope to perhaps bring about such much needed unity after 8 years of unrelenting wars and an ever-growing surveillance state under the neocons of George W. As the primary season began, Mr. Obama was carefully artful in his deceit, as he was the epitome of intellectual, well-articulated, smooth-spoken platitudes he surreptitiously offered the voters. I want to provide some evidence, however circumstantial I think it's telling, that in my research has become almost undisputed. As we all know, Hillary Clinton was also interested in running for the DNC nomination in 2008, though it looked as though she was not going to be in a position to claim enough delegates at the primary season, was early what one appeared to be a sweep by the cunning Obama. As the convention approached in August 2008, the last 3 states in July, remarkably, Hillary's luck changed, and in what seemed to be a political maven, Hillary's campaign announced that night, just 3 weeks from the convention, that she intends to activate her husband's superdelegates because he was president. It would provide her with enough delegates to contest the nomination in what seemed to forecast a vicious convention floor fight. As I was attempting to provide the basis of the NWO international banking establishment, that they had already made the determination that they wanted Obama to have the nomination, as they felt he was especially clever and calculating and more capable of beguiling the public into accepting the final stages of a complete dismantling of America, which the Bilderbergers necessarily needed. Obama's job would be to subvert the Constitution through executive overreach with the cover of being a minority. The Bilderbergers meet with every year in Western Europe, and during the U.S. presidential elections, always Fairfax, Virginia, outside of D.C. They were occupying the entire complex of the Radisson Hotel, surrounded by secret agents from every country, as they always occupied the whole complex, so no one is allowed to get even close to the perimeter of the hotel. The press were on the scene outside the complex, but from a distance they had only the opportunity to photograph the attendees as they entered the building, usually behind black-tinted windows that provided few actual photos. When Hillary announced her intentions to contest the convention in a floor debate for the nomination, the next day both Hillary and Obama were, as U.S. law, traveling with their press corps. Hillary's campaign issued a press release that said she would be spending the night at her Washington, D.C. residence, Georgetown. Obama's campaign told the press corps he would be traveling to Chicago from Dulles International. If you remember that night, there was a great deal of chaos within the press corps, with the Obama's press corps as well as Hillary's. The press corps for Obama was already on board the plane bound for Chicago. They expressed uncertainty as to where was the candidate, and Obama's press secretary, Mr. I forget his name, Biggs or whatever, was telling the press corps that he didn't know where they were, and they were like, where was the candidate? The plane began to taxi on the runway. The press corps started yelling, stop the plane. Obama is not on the plane. This is illegal, Mr. Obama. By law, cannot travel without the press corps. They have no obligation. They have an obligation to be president with both candidates until the convention. The press corps were infuriated by the obvious ditching of the press corps, now already airbound to Chicago without Mr. Obama. Hillary press corps was present at her Georgetown home, and CNN Candy Crowley announced on live television that Hillary press corps had no idea where the candidate was. Throughout the night, CNN continued to report that Hillary was nowhere to be found. Okay, this is where the circumstantial, however extremely compelling evidence suggests that the candidates were not missing, but had been summoned to the Bilderbergs. This is highly illegal for either of them to go anywhere near these people. The photographers outside the complex report seeing two separate blacked-out window sedans entering the heavily fortified complex within minutes apart and drive into the underground parking structure, so there was no one that could positively identify if it was Obama and Hillary, but this is what we know. The Bilderbergs had already made the selection that they wanted Obama to be the nominee for the above listed reasons. It's highly likely that both entered the room and the attendees articulated to Hillary if she was really going to do what she announced on TV the night before, or should she be reminded that they already told her what they wanted him. Hillary understands what this means. She's not stupid. These people will kill her if she thinks she's going to go through with this. Very soon, within 15 minutes, the two black sedans depart the complex, and within 1 hour, Hillary returns to her home and Obama boards another plane to Chicago. The next day, on national television, to everyone's surprise, Hillary decides she's no longer going to contest the nomination. This is more than obvious to anyone with a brain so ambitious as she, and suddenly she steps aside. It's quite likely that the Bilderbergs told Obama to offer her Secretary of State in the administration for her compliance. Mr. Obama and his lieutenant, Hillary, in their brilliant foreign policy that quite literally started the very same night Obama spoke in Cairo in 2009, only months into his first term. He insisted that the Muslim Brotherhood be seated in the auditorium to be an honored guest after the Egyptian government had made it unequivocally clear that they were not just subversive to the Mubarak regime politically, but were actively working with Hamas on a regular basis to undermine the treaty that exists between the political state of Israel and an Arab nation. This distinction was why Cairo had been the center of the Arab League for the Sunni majority of Islamic nations. Anything politically impartial or diplomatically necessary when events of the Arab world need to be addressed, however, necessarily apart from the larger world body of the UN. I digress. I apologize. But to frame the events of Mr. Obama and Hillary had together already conspired to dock a complete and utter destruction of the entire Middle East, topple the whole of the Arab world apart from the exceptions of Iran, which is not Arab, and Turkey. Why? Well, Turkey, because they need the geography from where the staging ground will have to be waged, so it cannot become destabilized until it has served its purpose. And for that from which the Syrian civil conflict, or so it's been understood from the very outset that it was a civil conflict, but it most definitely was not. It was American intelligence, CIA operatives that had formed through Hillary and Obama's foreign policy from his Cairo speech. This was his intention all along, to destabilize the Middle East in no uncertain terms. This also connects to why Syria, particularly because the Saudis have wanted for a very long time to have a pipeline directly from Saudi Arabia into Europe, because the Russians have one and it undercuts the price of oil, because Saudi Arabia and Russia are thought to be equally the most oil producers of the world, either or. There's a debate on who has more. But nevertheless, Saudi Arabia is not going to get their wish, because the Syrian conflict is going to keep Assad in power. That we know now. But I'm still going back through this information here, so let's see, as the Obama regime did. It served its purpose. Well, I have to say, yes, indeed, it has done so far, and rather well. It's doing its bidding for Washington, acting as though they can shoot down a Russian tactical jet fighters for what looks very much like a disputed mountainous outland region, well away from any civilian populations as strategic arms or military installations. This absurdity is easy to flesh out. When the Turks shot the plane down on December 2015, Erdogan's first call was all the evidence you need to understand that he is an American puppet client state doing the dirty work for Hillary and Obama. If the Turks just shot down a Russian tactical fighter jet whose presence has already been made well aware of the Turkish government weeks before the incident, why exactly was the dictator's first call to Washington and not to Putin? It's not all that difficult to fit this puzzle together. Just look at the events from Cairo's speech Obama just made months after he takes office in 2009. This speech was the single biggest event, diplomatically speaking, for the Arab League in the United States, of a matter of course, in 8 years of United States imperialism, waging wars of unilateral aggression in nations that had nothing to do with the Stupid Towers event. Even if the stupid American public do still want to believe it was a foreign Islamic terrorist, from the little bits of evidence they can claim to actually magically found in the inferno, two fully intact passports, not even burned, and in massive piles of debris and rubble. They just so happened to find these pieces, and if they have to say, they would, under the circumstances, be exceptional police work, to say the very least. What were these two pieces of evidence, and the government so quickly seizes upon the opportunity to call to a full-scale invasion of two nations? Okay, let's just stop here for a moment and examine what we have so far. This is incredibly complicated foreign policy and geopolitical discussions that I will begin to start working on in a series. I realize most people do not have the attention spans, but I could expect them to be interested in this information. It's perceived to be a kind of biggest difference in the reasons why and how it will be different lies in the very real understanding that I am not going to be paid to indoctrinate anyone into believing the American narrative of exceptionalism and above the rest of the world, so therefore we can never be wrong. Apart from the very big distinction, you also have the added incentive to want to know this information because it's real information, not editorialized opinion. I am seeking to illustrate. I have one objective and one and only, that is to be able to present the facts as we know them to be, make reasonable conclusions based on the assumptions we will draw from, and in facts that we know them to be. The very real and irreversible situations we find ourselves in today is somewhat too complicated to encapsulate into one overarching malignancy, but I will do my best to characterize it the best I might, allow myself to be based upon why the point of reference. Note, I was clear to avoid the word opinion because we are not or should not want to be any interested in opinions at all. Academic history, my field of expertise, is not at all ever concerned with opinions when we make determinations about historical events, times, and ever-moving, never-ending progression of time, and people who once were in the players from whatever the distant past, gone over 2,000 years since has been accomplished, or those events and situations that shape our present world today, from the very recent past, and the events that people who played their respective hearts for the most. The Arab world has been an unmitigated path of blood and misery brought to them from a land halfway across the world that felt compelling right to reason to annihilate 10 million lives either by loss of life or displacement. Whatever we want to characterize this, it remains to be, again, a matter of perspective, but for the facts are clear as day, are not lost top us, nor will they be lost in history in the future. So that was just my first installment on the Obama regime and the fraud that he was, the tyrant. I haven't finished writing my information for the George W. Bush administration stuff, so that's why I had made the Obama video first. It's not that the George W. Bush administration is fraught with enormous amounts of information and political intrigue that connects those dots back for it too. So it necessarily needs to be done, and I will do it. But I want to also catch up as quickly as possible, if I might, to the ongoing current administration, the Trump administration, that is a phenomenon unlike anything we've ever seen, an existential threat that he presents to the ruling oligarch political class. That he's not a political threat. They can deal with that. He's an existential threat that's other than that. And they're throwing everything that they can to undermine his credibility, to call him a liar, this, that, and the other. But it very much looks, and some people have been saying that it's quite possible that Trump is playing 4D chess. And this would be an unbelievable, wow, talk about impressive, if that's really what's going on, that Mueller has been in cahoots with Trump the whole time, and the whole left oligarch has been under the assumption that he's investigating Manafort, and that was all a setup just to get Trump to look bad, and that they're really doing all against Obama, Hillary. The Podestas supposedly have their passports revoked and have already been arrested. They're in custody. This is incredible. The Podestas are in custody. That means that the indictments, over 1,500 sealed indictments from this investigation alone. It's too early to tell yet, but there's been some stuff out on the internet, and if you get a chance, you might want to check it out. It's called Q Clearance 4NN sections 1, 2, 3, and 4 that can give you a better understanding of what 4G chess is all about, and that the CIA and the Marines had stormed the CIA headquarters to stop a coup. The president was locked down in secure location, that the country would be under martial law, and all of this would be taking place within the next 60 days. So let's hope that things turn out well, but I'll see you in the next version.